I hope so. So, okay, I have. Should I take my headphones out? Okay, and it won't affect people hearing, right? Because there's a speaker in there. A mic, sorry. Bye. Thank you, Roger. Through the headphones, no. But hold on, because this isn't bouncing at all, is it? Yeah, it's fine. I just wanted let you know why I'm not getting it. To hear if I hear him outside. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I hear him. And yeah.
Whenever you are ready. Who are you looking for? No, no, no. Pictures. You registered so far? But they give you a free one. No, it's your block. Yeah.
You want me to send it to you? I'll send it on WhatsApp.
Yeah, you have
That's what I'm trying to do because I'll be seeing his head.
Yeah, let's bring it over. You gotta move
I have to
everything.
move everything. So all right, computer. Hold on.
I find that is, or you want
So, don't interfere with TTT with the capital T, please.
no, but we could put it in between them and it wouldn't actually hamburg it.
You sure?
They won't see it in the frame.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, you're gonna pan? Oh, sorry,
Oh, okay.
I didn't know you was gonna pan. I thought you had I thought you had it static.
Put me where I wouldn't bother people.
All right, so right here with you.
Right there.
Yeah, I know. I didn't. I thought it was a static shot you were doing.
All right, watch. Center it. Yeah, we good. We good. Yeah, that's it. Thanks very much. Let me just ask somebody in air traffic control if they hear it. Shift. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You got this.
Yeah, man. Just have to sit here
Send me
and
links. I could put it on our Insta and Facebook.
yeah, let me set it now.
Let me just get a quick shot.
Can we drop it a little lower? Yeah. Six by six. 100 shutter, what shutter, what? 60 shutter, that's what we do. 100 shutter. 100 shutter.
You good, Debbie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming out on a Friday afternoon. I know there are other things that you could be doing with your time, and the fact that you've taken the time to be with us says a lot about you and about the subject that we're talking about this afternoon. So, without any further ado, my name is Douglas Wade Brunton, and I'm a lecturer in communication studies here at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, and I'm the moderator of this afternoon's panel. I do see some familiar faces, and I'd like to thank those that have returned to this, the fourth in the series of outside conversations that our department will be having this year. For our new audience, conversations we will be having are about cultures in order to be. And this afternoon, we're pleased to be partnering with the organizers of the West Indian Literature Conference to celebrate the 50th anniversary of BIM, a seminal production in the creative history of our country. The theme of this year's literature conference is Making Us Better Than We Think We Can Be, and that forms part of our conversation during this afternoon, allowing us to interrogate the cultural context of our country at the moment just prior to assuming Republican status as a nation. In an article printed in Caribbean B to mark the 50th anniversary of the film in 2004, filmmaker and Chris Paddington wrote of BIM, released in 1970. It was filmed on location in Trinidad and Tobago, only a few years after the country had survived Black Power demonstrations, an army mutiny, and a guerrilla movement by idealistic young radicals reaching for a new society. The film was directed by Hugh Robertson and produced by his wife, Suzanne. BIM won a gold medal at the USBI Film Festival in St. Thomas in 1975 and was shown at the Carifesta Festival in Jamaica and the Los Angeles Film Festival both in 19. BIM became somewhat of an artistic success, winning awards in various film festivals, and it became a West Indian cult movie in the genre of the Jamaican movie of the same era, The Harder They Come. But in Trinidad and Tobago, the country of its origin, and the setting for its story, the movie never really took. Even before it premiered in Port Spain, it was an upset. The film was banned by the censors on the strength of the fact that one of the characters uttered bullshit and murders once or twice in the 2 hours it took to unravel the case. While BIM may not have been commercially successful, it had a coherent plot, a tight structure, credible acting performances, So, with all of that being said, the point of the episode is what does BIM tell us about us? And to help us interrogate and answer this question, the members of the panel, beginning from my immediate right, are Dr. Yao Ramazar, who is the coordinator of the film degree program here at UB St. Augustine. Ghanaian born, but a Caribbean filmmaker to his roots. Yao Ramazar's work has been recognized by the award of the Caribbean's first laureate in arts and letters at the inaugural Anthony M. Sackler Caribbean Awards for Excellence in 2006. And the awards acknowledge that Ramazar's most significant contribution is that he has taken Caribbean cinema to the world under the rubric of Caribbean. With nearly 4 decades in film that have been marked by records, awards, and accolades, we spend time reflecting not just his artistic output, but also his seminal practice. Here, how does environmental work celebration being exhibited in Italy at the Florence, as well as 3 newly minted, 2 for Best Feature and 1 for Best Director on his work in progress motion picture 14 for War since September 2020. Professor Bridget Merton, next to Dr. Ramazar, has demanded us that I use the quick notes with the short version of her career as an introduction, and I'm happy to oblige. She is the Emerita Professor of History here at UB St. Augustine and the author of many books, articles, and book chapters on history, anatomy, and the Caribbean. Next to Professor Merton, we have Mandisa Pantin, was born the year after it was finally released, and Mandisa has spent the last 20 years working in the film industry, having written and releasing 2 short films. After graduating with first class honors in 2011 from UB's film program, Mandisa works as a script supervisor, production coordinator, festival programmer, and she continues to be an independent filmmaker known for challenging boundaries in her storytelling. Mandisa is best recognized for a documentary, Caribbean Skin African Identity, and has directed several short films, with the last being an experimental one called Staying in Place in a COVID-free Space, which is a reflection of her emotions during the enforced COVID lockdown in 2020. Ms. Panton's extensive experience in film programming and coordination highlights her significant role in curating Caribbean and Black cinema globally. And our last panelist is Mr. Gideon Hanuman Singh, who has been a television journalist for over 40 years. Mr. Hanuman Singh has worked at TTT as a news reporter anchor at the Caribbean News Agency in Barbados and was a CNN World Report contributor for 10 years, during which he interviewed President Bill Clinton live on CNN about the US Caribbean foreign policy. Mr. Hanuman Singh has also produced several documentaries, including Calcutta to the Caribbean, Legacy of Our Ancestors, and Autism Silver Lining, which won local and Caribbean awards. He is currently working on a biography called Shattered Dreams, Perspectives of a Journalist. And Mr. Hanuman Singh served as an elected member of Parliament at the time, and was one of those who was a hostage at TTP during the 1990s. So, with I have one more bit of housekeeping that I have to cover. Right. So on the screen to each side of the rostrum, you will see 30-second clips of the film being looped to provide content and to set the mood. These clips fall under the fair use tenet of copyright and were extracted from legitimately purchased a copy of the film held by the film unit here at the UBC University. So, though the film and its production will be the focus of our conversation this afternoon, we can expect this conversation to touch on many other issues, among which we will talk about politics, personal agency, race, violence, history, and intended audience. I will invite each of the panelists to make an opening statement, and then the conversation will proceed naturally. The final half hour will be given to answer your questions from here and from those in our online audience, and we will entertain comments, after which the panelists will again be given 2 minutes to make a closing statement. So, off we go, and Professor Merton to
Anyway, good afternoon, fellow panelists, and good afternoon to the audience. Thank you so much for coming. I am going to steer clear of that question at this point and do what I was told to do, which is say a little bit about the historical context of BIM. I was told that sorry, for the first time in God knows how many decades. Now, it was released in 1974, but set in the period just before independence, 1959, 61. This was a very volatile period in TNT's political history. When is TNT politics? Not politics, but this really was. We are post-war, universal adult suffrage, 1946, a whole number of parties and new alliances and leaders have been last very long. And it has to be said, Afro-Indo relations became more tense as British colonial rule began to wind down. Now, as I note, the PNM, a brand new party, emerged in 1956. But what not everybody knows is that its main opponent in the election of that year was the PEP, the People's Democratic Party, founded in 1952, based on newly enfranchised rural Hindu voters and was led by Bhagavad Saga Maharaj. Now, Bhagavad is all over the movie. So let me just spend a minute on Bhagavad. He was the son of a village headman, the head of a village panchayat, the traditional Hindu council of elders who ran the village. In his youth, he was a traditional Indian wrestler, which was a very, very popular sport in the rural villages in the 30s, 40s, 50s. He didn't have much formal education, but he made a fortune buying and selling surplus war material from the American bases. So he became a rich man. He was a patron of science. He helped poor Hindus. He sponsored religious and cultural events. And very important, he established the Sanatana Dharma, the main body representing the Orthodox Hindus. He established it and he led it from 1952 right up to his death in 1971. So he's a political leader with a political party and a seat in Ledgeco as it then was. He's a religious leader, and as we'll see in a minute, he's a union leader also. Now, as we all know, the PNM won that election and formed the government. Today, Errol Jones as a cameo appearance as the Eric Williams figure. He doesn't remotely resemble Eric Williams, but he is in the film as the leader of well, PNM, though it's not named. But that wasn't the end of Barnes as a politician. He morphed into a new party, the Democratic Labour Party, the DLP, with Barnes as its leader, and it won a shock victory in 1958 in the federal election. It won 6 out of the 10 seats in the federal parliament, which would be allocated to CMC. This was a huge shock to everybody, who effectively delivered famous or infamous, I think I would say, speeches in which he labeled, I'm going to be fair, not the entire indigenous population, but a subset of that population. His famous words, a hostile and recalcitrant minority, which did not do anything for Indo-Afro relations. Now, moving is going to talk about the election, the upcoming election, and this is referring to the election of December 1961, the last election before independence. This was an extremely tense election. Afro-Indo relations deteriorated. DLP meetings in Port of Spain and environment and in Afro-majority areas were broken up, were beaten up. The PNF government declared limited states of emergency in Indo-majority areas. And the new leader of the DLP, Kaspade, became ill and was sidelined in favor of Ruben Capildeo. Capildeo himself did not help matters by making intemperate speeches, including telling his followers that they were called to arms to defend themselves. So it was a rough time. There were even calls in the run-up to this election for partition of Trinidad on the model of Cyprus. Now that was not a mainstream position. It certainly wasn't the DLP position. But such calls were being made, which gives you a sense of how tense the situation was. Okay, the PNM won the election and proceeded to independence. The federation dissolved in 1962. Now, unions in the sugar belt. This is central. In the post-war period, there was a huge amount of confusion, conflict, rivalry, as different leaders, most of them Indo-Trinidadian, tried to form unions which represented or would represent the mainly Indo-Sugar workers. And these rivalries often involved violence, guns, and armed confrontation. Our friend Gades, already a member of LESCO, a party leader and a Hindu leader, he emerged in 1953. So he emerged as the strong man in the sugar belt. And he remained union leader, notwithstanding many challenges, right up to his death in 1971. But rivalries, intrigues, and conflicts continued in union politics in the sugar belt. And that is met various challenges with the aid of armed tension and violence. Now, I think that at least three characters in the movie are partially modeled on Buddy. Maybe Bim's father, who is killed at the beginning of the movie. Definitely the fellow called Baba Charlie, who is the leader who kills Bim's father, and Bim himself, who clearly has a weakness for violence, let's put it that way. So we have to remember that in the 1950s and into the 60s, Indo-Trinidadians, particularly rural Hindus, were generally looked down on by white and brown and black Creole people. And rural Indus had a particularly hard time in Port of Spain, which was a Creole space and a Christian. So the scene in the movie when young Bim terrorized in his school, both by his fellow students, pupils, and by the teacher, is very plausible. And lots of other writers, including Gideon Naipaul, have written about this. Now, this did begin to change in the 1970s with the oil boom, etc. And I think the film very well brings out the, I don't want to use the word hysteria, but the independence under a Creole government, the People's Negro Group, as Indo's often called it. And when Federation was still around, fears that in a federal government, they would be an even smaller minority because Guyana was not part of the Federation. And they felt they had to defend their ethnic interests. And this comes out towards the end of the movie when Bim tries to establish a party to defend them. So I'll stop there, Chair.
Yeah. Great. I just want to. I want to put this in perspective from the perspective of the director, who is Hugh Robertson, and it's complicated. Hugh Robertson and what BIM is considered in many ways, the foundation film that Trinidad and Tobago's history. It's predated by who was an Indian from India, which is the writer named Fox. And those start Ralph Maraj, who we will talk about, because he was the lead in them. Now, oh, excuse me. Okay. Nominations, the first African American. What has happened in Hollywood post 1968 at the peak of the civil rights movement is that Hollywood was broke. Would include directing Melinda, which is a classic blaxploitation movie, and that was starring Vanessa McKee, Calvin Lockhart, Jim Kelly. Very, very, those are recurring actors in that particular era. Also, he edited Shaft, which was directed by the great Gordon Parks. And these are films that started to seep into our consciousness as they played in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, the link between blaxploitation and Black Power is on the same axis of the 1970s, right? Because what typically would have happened is that after civil rights, Hollywood, apart from seeing, they were saved by blaxploitation because African Americans had fled the cities. White people, whites had fled the cities, and African Americans would in the inner cities. And all
Project. Talk hard. Yes.
Yeah.
Oop.
Robertson decided we wanted to first do biopic on Boise Singh. Now, Boise Singh is a famous gangster who predates, of course, Radhi Sagar Maharaj and then, I guess, Big Singh. That's character in the film. However, we couldn't get it right. We couldn't get it right. Right? Richard Douglas. Yeah, we couldn't get it right. So they lined up with BIM. It's a portrait given by what's that? Well, Thompson. That's what people call it. 16 years is just on my part. I think it would have been very difficult for in the wake of Black Power, in the wake of the National Union Freedom Fight 1972, go back to 1972. Now make the equivalent of a Black exploitation movie with a figure of resistance, a la how did it come? With the play. And then later, the final development of the constitution. Because we were understandably that it was destabilized. In fact, when it was the census board said no. There's an irony there because I was on the census board with Horace O'Brien 5 years. Ralph Rudd actually was the minister, line minister. And Ralph Rudd wanted us, and we wanted Horace and I, and Joanne Leonard, wanted to end censorship, change the name of the board, call it the Board of Review Rating. And unfortunately, we got some opposition. What I can say is, in those 5 years, we never covered the film. I got them scared, but I got it scared because
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but we're picking you up on the mic.
ultimately, those same people, Europe, certain companies said, no, integrity. And we ended up putting it 18 years ago. Now, back in the days, I was young, I was not 18 when I saw it. You know that, right? So, you know, that was the time when censorship, you can look so books and films, films are very rare. Films are very rare. The experience, I used to say, I was doing an interview, very much, right? Yeah. You want Mike, Mike?
Mic on? Ooh.
Can you hear me?
No.
You turn it up a little bit? Yeah. You gotta get yeah. I did an interview once, and I think we need to try to mark the time. It's really important. But did an interview once when I don't really detail. I said that there were 6 cinemas in walking distance. That was my first film. I was trying to press Palladium, Monarch, in this area, in this whole area. Right? So that is the bigger one that most of that kind of area. And I would tell you the experience was the rarity of seeing a local film. I think that's one thing that blew me. So it's kind of exciting when it's had. The kind of impact sensors and we're looking to brainstorm. It was extremely impactful. It was a revelation. We never really saw ourselves in that kind of emphasize real estate before cinema, you know? It's very empowering. So I think again, the Rapurat figure is interesting because why did Hugh Robertson?
One, two, check. Yeah. Okay. So why did Hugh Robertson, after what Professor Burton said, We understand who Robertson is steering away. There's some very interesting things. What is an African American or Jamaican parentage making in the era of Black Power? So all those things are very interesting. One of the things I can tell you that he was
Hmm.
um, sorry, he was influenced heavily like everybody, including Trinidad and Tobago by a film called The Godfather 1972. So originally flirting with voices singing and then doing this film. It's kind of logical. And that resistance hero is very, very critical, not just in Caribbean cinema, but in all cinemas of the South. There's one caveat though, and this is Gladstone Yearwood, who was a major film scholar. He had a thesis on how did it come, in the sense that, and this is recurring in all of our films, the resistance leader, the outlaw, who we revere because the colonial system has us, and we want to see people who break it, the maroons, the rebels. But they always get sacrificed in the end. And I always say, what's that saying, you know? In fact, sometimes are you getting financed because we got to be, if you're telling them rebellion equals death and it's going to be put down, maybe that's true in real life. But I wanted to see people kind of survive. What rebel survival is a critical thing, you know? So these are the things I would just jump around with. Um, Soundtrack is incredible. Andre Tankers because of European sensitivity to music and the fact that he got into sharp music and he had his own music, you know, music is a big part of it. Um, the Douglas kind of rendezvous that took place with Tanker on the soundtrack. It's very important in our history because that's where you saw that kind of um, hybridization and cross-fertilization of African. They were really trying to come with a cross-fertilization between the major races. Yeah. In fact, people know, you know, that when they had the Black Power, and of course, Macandal Dagger came from the head of the Youth Students Guild, God bless. Um, he, when they had the March on Carney, when they went they marched to meet the Indians in Carney, and that was it's the reason why there was, British was saying, the reason why British colonial didn't want divide and rule. They had the big sign, Indians and Africans unite and fight. That sent chills through the status quo. So you can see them in that crucible trying to come up with things, you know? The writer out Camden as well. You see, these are the things they were touching on. So that's where BIM sort of made that move at a critical time. I would like to refer, lock off a bit, but 1973 is important because this came out 75, they say it came out in 75, right? But in that mix, of course, you had 17 Black Power and 73 with the guerrilla movement, the National Union of Freedom Fighters went into the hills in the end and so on. My mother's first cousin's son is Guy Jackson Philip was the leader of the movement. I remember his mother calling him all the time crying because he was expected to be killed. He was eventually shot in the St. Joseph River by Randy Burroughs many years ago. And then they were playing Jericho, Road March by Kitchener. That was his nom de guerre, head of Nuff, another young idealist. The real rebels dead. They were killed too. I'm saying the theme is actually accurate in real life. But Jericho was the nom de guerre of Guy Jackson Philip Haywood, who was the leader of the National Union of Freedom Fighters, the guerrilla movement. He, of course, was killed, and he was celebrated in song. And the same Kitchener won the road march because that means people, you have to listen to the lyrics too. People want that. Didn't resist it. So ultimately, we look at BIM, the reception for BIM was modest here, right? Just the way it is. Had we had things where you could have pirate things, it would have been a different thing. Because if you're buying a calypso, everybody listening to it, right? Sunday Morning Coming Down was the first erotic novel that we had publicly. They banned it, and it was everywhere, every book, every airport. So that would have been really lovely if we had the medium where the rebellion that we met with the public could have the satisfaction of, getting away with things, But it wasn't to be. And then we had the sad case where I spoke with the accountant for the film. I sat on it. He was living in Cascade. I went by him and I wanted to look at the books and find out what happened. What happened with because this was the sustainable. And I never already found out. We dropped a bottle of scotch, but nothing happened in here. But that's what but the beauty of it is he was in the throes of a second feature in spite of everything. He was in the throes of the second feature, which was The Haunting of Avril. And my friends were in it. Albert Laveau, great Shakespearean and author, and Walcott, an actor. And his son was my friend Pierre Laveau, who is now a Bobo Shanty. And I remember that was happening, and we were excited waiting on that. Your friends were in it. And that was never finished. It was finally completed and released some years ago. It's sort of like what happened with How Did They Come? Because Perry, speaking of Perry, Pencil who made it years ago. And I said, what happened to the second rounds, And he said, well, boy, what's his name? The lead in it, this is another big lead. Cliff, Jimmy Cliff. He said Jimmy Cliff, but he ain't taking that. He get report. So he was going to make a follow-up of How Did They Come with the character's nephew or some nonsense. But unfortunately, that was never done. 2006, because these two films, that's a very small body of work for major directors. It talks about P. Robertson, that's his fourth. But anyway, it wasn't until 2006 that Perry Ansel had a film that came out that they finally restored, and it was shown in I was in Toronto with my film at the same time. Those are the two Caribbean films, and I was surprised because I was like, what? What film like Perry Ansel? I thought it was only one. He never talked about it. Yeah. To come back to How Did They Come, the condition of the film, I think we know, that film is not accessible in a condition where people can see it clearly. It needs to be what they did with every second film. They need to, it takes money, it takes commitment for it to be remastered, the sound and the image and everything come back to life. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. Because what does it say about Trinidad and Tobago film? Well, it says, we're talking about this classic film, seminal film from 50 years ago, and it's not accessible to anybody. It's just a myth to us. People already don't see it. So how, that I would think is a challenge. I don't know what has happened.
Just maybe prejudice influences how we interact with each other as human beings, right? And one thing I want to say is, when I told my father, I entered into the program, he said, Manisa, I thought in 1975.
Okay. Well, we've spent so much time here already. Might be time to wrap up. A friend with him, and the friend said, "Get your ass in the car, and we will pray after." That was the first encounter. On one other occasion, I was campaigning for a meeting at St. Helena Junction. And while setting up for one of the village meetings, the Pulul brothers came and confronted me. I was the driver of the car, and they said, "Get out of here." And I asked, why? You're young, you're 17, you're innocent, you're hot-blooded. Why? And he said, if you don't get out of here, we will show you why. And he pulled out a gun. Of course, hurriedly broke down the microphone, by which time he was using this acrylic paint to write vote PDP, which was Bades's party. And so we left. Later in the evening, we went to St. Helena Junction, another large crowd. And I remembered Ashton Chambers was speaking at the time. He was the candidate for one of the East-West corridor seats. And as Ashton was speaking, gunshots went off. Again, we had to scamper. And that was my introduction to the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. To a large extent, those events stayed in my mind until I myself became involved actively in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago in 1994 when I fought a by-election in the Point de Vecchio constituency. And I became a preacher. I became the person on the UNC platform who was different to Basdev Pandey, different to Ramesh Maharaj, different to Trevor Sudama. I was speaking to the Lord. I was using his words to get the message across to the audience. And one day I was walking the streets campaigning, and I met this humongous Afro-Trinidadian woman walking in the opposite direction. And I went up to her, shaking. And the woman looked at me and she said, I don't want to shake hands. I felt if the earth had opened at that moment, I was ready to volunteer inside. And as though she interpreted my expressions, my facial expressions, she said, I want a hug from you. And she came and she hugged me. She said to me, you will win the election, politician. Well, it seems as though her words, just like Raoul Pantin's words about BIM and what happened in the character that he painted, where he used a racketeer who eventually became a union leader, who became a politician, and one in later years will become a prime minister. Well, I did not look at BIM in its entirety. I went to the cinema one day, and one of the scenes that sent me out of the movie house was when this teacher was whipping this little boy. And I felt taken back to 1958 at Cunupia Government School when I got whips like that. And I said, no, that barbarity in the school system, I never appreciated. And I am not going to sit in cinema and revisit those youthful days of my life. But what is interesting is that it took me almost 3 weeks to prepare some notes. I came here excited to present what I have written, but I've realized from the format of this conversation, these notes are better suited for file 13. I want to be different, slightly different in the very short presentation that I am going to make. And maybe that's why I wore this hat, because when I first put on this hat, somebody looked at me. In fact, Dr. Botiwari, who is my neighbor, saw me wearing this hat. He said, boy, you're looking like Naipaul. Well, I would like to be different for a moment, and that is to admit that I feel totally displaced among this group of academics here, critiquing BIM. And I want to recite words of a song that goes something like this. And if you know the meaning, raise your hand. Bar bar din ye aaye, bar bar dil ye gaye, tujhe hazaro saal, ye meri hai arzu. Does anybody know what it means? 4 lines to explain 4 words. Happy birthday to him.
Oh,
Okay, so now that we've set the stage, I'm going to start asking some difficult questions, right? So, we all know that the movie is a work of fiction, and Professor Burton has done a good job in contextualizing the time of the film in when it was set, but also the time of the film when it was released. And my question is, how real do portrayals of Trinidad need to be to tell stories of
Okay. Here's what I think. I think that we don't have to sell Trinidad in terms of just only telling all the stories of history. Filmmaking is two things to many people: escapism and enjoyment. What film I think we have to be careful also about trying to buttonhole our industry. I'm a filmmaker. I tend to be like my father. I tend to make these films which sort of are difficult reflections of society, and either at the point in time I get critics in the audience and great remarks afterwards, or I get great reviews from you know, some some festival I'm in, but it doesn't necessarily make for a massive audience reaction. So I think be careful and try to buttonhole film industry into any one stream. That's one thing. But I would say one thing I admire about them is of speech, patterns of speech. One of the great debates when I entered the film program was whether or not we use proper English, like I'm trying to use now, in all of our work so that an international audience can appreciate it, or whether we have to speak pure Trinidadian and talk real fast and say whatever you want to say and then subtitle it.
push
My
people way
vote,
high.
speak pure Trinidadian, say what you want to say and either subtitle it. So don't just leave it with. But again, I think we have to be careful about saying we have to be real as a Trinidadian cinema, but holding ourselves in that. Thank you.
I agree completely with what Lisa just said. But what I wanted to say, I really appreciated what Yao was saying because one of the things I was going to say is that it struck me that it was unusual and courageous for Hugh Robinson, who I knew was not an American person, to make a movie in 1973, 74, in which all the lead characters, with one or two exceptions, were Indo-Chinese. And not only Indo-Chinese, but rural Hindu Chinese. I thought that was remarkably great because at that time, exactly what Yao was saying, what you would expect, perhaps, what I reflecting about it, would have expected was a movie about black power. Not necessarily about the gorillas, but about the overall black power movement. And instead, at a time when rural Hindus were not highly thought of in Creole society, and at least some settlers were hardly considered part of Creole society at all. He chose to make a movie which centered that section of society. But I think Yao explained part of the reason for that, and I found it very interesting. He wanted to do Boise Singh, who of course was safely dead. Right? Thaddeus wasn't dead, and they wasn't there when was happening, but couldn't get the rights to the Pinkerton book. So I appreciate that because I think that helped to explain. It would have been so good if he had gone on to try and make a film in which Black power and its impact on the society had been central.
But after that, it's all speculative. He did Midnight Cowboy. It's out of his cultural realm to a certain extent. It's a white film, urban white film, John Boyd and the boy, Dustin Hoffman. Um, he would have worked closer, gone closer into his realm with the Melinda, which he directed and he edited Shaft. I think he was an outsider. He wasn't burdened by the forces of someone living here. So he was able to have this conjecture. So he came fresh. He may have had different perspective. So they freedom to do that. In terms of what Mandy says about the language, we don't believe in writing. And there was one guy who's no longer with us, but he said this thing about right stuff. There's no such thing as standard English, by the way, or proper English or dialect. It's language. He was just telling students to um, write it in standard English and then let the actors say it on speak, which is absolute rubbish. You write as your character speaks. And this character has to speak not just, it's just very localized. There's no Trinidadian or Tobago. What's the class? What's happening in the film? You could say I love you one way in the beginning and in the end it's a different language because you're not in the same state with a woman or man or whatever. Right? So all of these things are static. But definitely language. Subtitling and dubbing is crucial. My last film here is like English. I want to say this because English, you were part of that? Yeah. English, Spanish, and French for now, right? So why are subtitles in English? People are kind of middle class too. We have no idea. There's so many films we sent out, didn't realize people are so hell say, think we speak in standard English. So that gets you to exactly what the people sound like. That is script you're writing, you direct the performance that way. And you can subtitle and dub. The trick about subtitling is I have to have a kind of new kind of subtitling where subtitling tended to translate to their language, but I actually kind of hybridize it. So we have our language in it too, right? So punching was my savior. I was chasing life with rum. See, they know what punching is, but they forgot what rum is. So they kind of put two and two together, the same in literature. So we kind of trying to even give that kind of thing in. There's a film by David McConnell, Cheese, right? More recently. But he used the subtitles as a funny thing because people were not seeing what the subtitles were saying. So it was a big joke. But all language is important. We just want to be straight with it. The other thing about film is a construct on its own. It's not real, folks. So, what you want to show the real Trinidadian film, you can't do that exactly. You tend to play a little bit with the language because of efficiency and how it's delivered and it works. So you have to create a hybrid. Another thing is you kept saying this mantra. There's all annoying things, but I won't do tonight. Okay, I'm spraying my brother. Um, telling own stories. Yeah, because everybody else was interpreting us. And what stories might those be? All right? My sister's talking about colorism and stuff. The powers that be. Remember, Europe is around out the money, basically. So, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And if he who pays the piper now says, nah, you're going to do it that way, I ain't choosing that. Right? Those people are from the ghetto being funding that. Those are people who are from the ghetto being not putting it down festival. Okay? So those films were some of the realest because they come from the ground. The real people not playing games here. But the status quo say you basically banned. Look at what happened with the film we're talking about. The status quo say you're banned. They don't want you to get through to people. I'm not saying pretty bad as I'm not advocating, but I'm saying why not? Where do you think rap music came from? That's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? I'm not going into the misogyny and all the guns and gangs. I was in rap music for a while in the peripherals when it was coming up, making music videos. I was there when it had suddenly turned from conscious to gangster. So I understand all of that. But we have to examine the society. Same thing, I like what Anissa saying because she said, spoke of an industry as something that exists, right? Yeah. Oh, we must build a film industry. One day, hope, hope. You had an industry already. You therefore you now what you doing with it? Because it's all
But it was always this Eldorado. We call it Eldorado. There's something in the distance. Like this would be a reward in heaven. But yeah, you need to check. One thing you do is to struggle. If you want to say how this is in fact, you have to look. It may happen in Jamaica. It may happen in
Senegal, right? 1970s, you have 72, 73, 74, and 75. How did it come? What happened after that? Trinidad had BIM. BIM was, people knew about BIM because Hugh Robertson was an Academy Award nominee for this and a great American classic, and he was involved and he's known. What happened after that? What happened after Jibril Diop Mambeti did Tuki Buki in Senegal? So these three films in the so-called South were supposed to spark a revolution. Where, yeah. So where did it, what happened? Like the art, right? What happened? Why this long gap? Why are we still nothing against Terry and why were we um, not yeah, yeah. Why how did it come not still the quintessential and nothing should be yeah, what I'm saying, where's the other stuff? What happened? Right? I'll give you an example. My friend Storm Slaughter, you know, put them in the second but he had a film he was doing, which I thought was a potent for how did it come. And I didn't like the title because he called it Better Must Come. I said, you know what I mean? People don't know that.
Ooh.
That is the closest. That is 2010. That is supposedly came out. So you're looking at 74, right? 2010. Yeah. So we have to figure out why we had this meeting, this movement, and what happened after, and we're not kind of picking it up. In Trinidad and Tobago, after to answer some questions about the African Canadian, obviously male versus according to male directives and male needs. But Prabhas Kumar, Indian from India, Prabhas Kumar went on to direct not from Africa, Joe from India, and Joe from India.
Oh.
And I can't remember, he died a couple of years ago, but that was a star boy. Michael Walker. Michael Walker was the shark. Michael Walker used to do all the fun in the kitchen. Yeah, you know? I was like, oh, nice. You know? So we had those films. We had Anthony Maharaj, another one. Those films never came to the level. That's another thing. We had films, but none of them came to the level as the quick. You know, because usually there's a kind of progression, but they didn't have. We went backwards. So all of the Amazon women. Anybody saw that? It's available to stream on Amazon. We had now we have the what I call rental plantation, which is that we had the black and black ground. I like how you because when I was growing up, these films from these B or C or B movies came from Hollywood. We all kind of watched the right? Rick Kirkland and Rock George Von Boy. We come here to be the stars of a rubbish film with and we look after it as well. Right? Yeah. You must watch it. I have it. Go to Amazon woman. If you don't know who Beulah is, Beulah was a community and a big lady, well, woman substance. They built Shalarama. They built an African village of huts. And they were boiling master and pot, man and pot and thing. And Beulah had coconut shell bikini top. And she was the only one that the like, guy was forced to be married to. All of it was
Sickening, right? And people who worked on it, like production assistants and so on, after 2, 3 weeks on set, they was talking Yankee. It's a wrap. Hello, man, fresh water, 2, 3 weeks. That's a lot about the neo-colonization that took place in cinema. So that we might want to look at going forward when you talk about a real Trinidad, or you want to look at a very indigenous model. And I'll be brief now. The recently deceased Antillean filmmaker Christian Lara, very important figure, right? Christian Lara had a 6 point thing where for what constitutes a Caribbean film. When I was in the States and in Howard University, it was what constitutes a black film. And everybody had to be behind in front of the camera, the creators, the actors, everybody had to be African American. In their case, Caribbean, yeah. All my films are Caribbean, even the money. So, that's why it's so modest, right? Yeah. But everything is Caribbean. Even the foreigners are residents 20, 30 years. You understand? I just hinted at it. But that's what I think it takes if you want Trinidad and Tobago film. Now there's a game where you want to get some foreign actor to be the lead. It doesn't work. I don't believe in that formula. This is what Storm did. I didn't agree with him. I said, Storm, do not put Roger from Spike Lee films as Michael Mann. It's not going to work. See? It didn't work. And it's a serious figure. You can't have a kind of guy struggling. Sorry, Roger, love you. Struggling with the accent, Then we had One Love, which had its own issues. The language you did that one of my colleagues that had dialect coach, right? Caribbean linguists do not use the word dialect. We have languages. Okay? So all of the things we have to kind of get in the mix and the writing of the dialogue and everything. So it rings true. At the same time, film is not completely a real thing. And then you have imagination and conjecture. You have Afrofuturism. So you have the freedom to imagine, which I'm doing. My film, it snows on the beach in the end and Sanssouci, right? I have little illusions to climate change, Yeah. And there's a lot of customers like that too. So, and it doesn't get programmed, it doesn't get censored. It doesn't get programmed in some cases because it's sensitive to that. Another thing about censorship too, when we're on the censors board, same thing a foreign film could have. We saw it in a local film that they want us to censor it. They're allowed to cuss, but if we cuss, it reflects on us. So they have all of these kind of isms and schisms, right? So I think that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Ooh.
Right. And that will bring me to my next question, which is a direct follow, right? And I'm going to use Elizabeth Solomon's quote to take us there. So Elizabeth Solomon hinted at the movie offending public decency and the attempt to have it back. So the question becomes one of identity and propriety. Are we consequences? We are as a people, and therefore, what stories we tell when so.
Okay, let me try and tackle that. I don't think, and this is just my general experience. To be 49 this year, I'm not a feminist in everything. I don't think generally Trinidadians, Begonians, and Caribbean people, from seeing so many Caribbean films, being a program of Caribbean Tears International Film Festival, I think it's a constant seeking of identity. And I think you will see some expressions that are more comfortable than others. And out of that, I have found Trinidadian and Tobagonian are more comfortable in the fantasy of any other genre than many other islands. And I'm just being real. Because for that, you get to speak however you want, create a horror look, do this, say things that you mightn't otherwise say in, let's say, a less surreal setting of it. And so I just answer that question. I don't think particularly Trinidad and Tobago is very comfortable in what we are. What are we? And I do think as a Caribbean as a whole, we are constantly seeking identity because you have to remember a lot of American media is so powerful, or in case of other islands that speak different languages, France, right? Dutch, which is the Netherlands. Um, their media shapes a lot of what people think of themselves. And once you have a powerful media, in our case it's the American media, then it's very difficult for you to now shape yourself outside of that, right? And when you do, you become a creative thinker in some ways. That's what I have to say about that.
So, using Elizabeth Solomon's reference, right, that movie offended public decency and there was an attempt to have it banned. The question becomes one of identity and propriety. Are we as Trinidadians or Caribbean people comfortable with who we are as a people and the stories that arise out of that?
I think we are. For the simple reason you no longer have a distinction between parent and adult and children sitting in the same room looking at a US film with all the expletives. So what we do is we sit there comfortably with our children, listening to all of these things, and you hear the children say, "But mom, dad, I am growing up, and that doesn't bother me. That doesn't change my mind of how I think about life. So let it roll." And that's where we are in the era of language. I must say this, that I never had a passion for the stage. I took a front seat in news and current affairs, and I remained there. So the creative part that would cause inquisition about so many things that I've heard here this evening, I am, like Professor Brereton, out of that. I prefer to look at life in a more serious way. And if I had my way in terms of producing, as I have done, short pieces, documentaries, legacy of our ancestors was the first one, in which we did a lot of recreations of life. Professor Brereton was part of that. I did Calcutta to the Caribbean, in which I took the camera to Delhi in search of a Trinidadian of African ancestry who was teaching Kathak dance in Delhi and receiving rave reviews from the gurus of Kathak dance. Dance. They felt that he was doing such a fantastic job, and I thought that was one way in which I can bring the society together. Seeing an Afro Trinidadian doing a very classical Indian dance, I thought that was cohesion. In fact, his mother, who lives in Kent, said that she was amazed when she got this call from her son, Quincy, saying, Mom, I want to go to India to study Kathak dance. She said, but this is strange. I've never heard of another Afro Trinidadian who wants to do this. But he had a passion for it. He saw art. He didn't see a division between Indos and Afros. He saw something beautiful and he went after it. And today he is one of the most successful Indian classical dance tutors in the whole of the Indian subcontinent. You see, it depends on what we want to project in our society and the message that we want to deliver. There's a young man by the name of Anthony Batson who finds peace in a mandir in McBean. This is an Afro-Trinidadian young man who grew up during the time of Sundar Pope. And he felt that Sundar was doing such a fantastic job. He wanted to emulate Sundar Popo. And he was confronted by some of his own neighbors and Afro-Trinidadian friends. Why are you so involved in that devil culture? And I was amazed at this young man's response. He said, I have told all of them, this is not devil culture, this is divine culture. Now, we mentioned the name Harbans Kumar. And we know the two films that he produced, The Right and the Wrong, and the other one. And of course, Harbans had his own issues, and actors had their own issues with Harbans Kumar. Michael Walker would never stop telling me every time he asked Harbans for payment, Harbans would say, Michael, film did not make any money. Film did not make any money. I can't pay you. But Michael loved the genre, he loved the industry, and he went along. And whatever roles he got, he said, even if it was for a penny, I would do it because of my love for the industry. How we project ourselves, how do we get people to understand who we are, comes in different dimensions. I remember growing up in the newsroom of TTT, and I would say to my colleagues that, when you do a story, understand that there are visitors from the United States, England, Canada, Germany, wherever. They are in our audience because once they are in a hotel room, they want to know what's happening in their environment. So they would look at the news, and we must be careful what language we use in communicating the story. I am not saying to you, you must use an accent, but be careful how you deliver your lines to those viewers and those visitors. And one man said to me, we are working for CNN, I work in for TTT. There came a time in 1990 when Abu Bakr was released, and one of our colleagues was doing a piece for a foreign film company that was here doing some work with TTT. And they submitted the story for coverage. And TTT's Afzal Khan, who was head of news, got a call. And the call was, we are looking for Mr. Hanuman Singh because we want him to do a story on the release of Abu Bakr. And Afzal said, but we had a story that we sent on the satellite, the bird, we called it. And they said, yes, we saw the story, but unfortunately, we cannot understand the language of the report. And we feel that this story is extremely important, not only for Trinidad and Tobago, but the world over, because the world descended on our doorsteps when Abu Bakr took over the country. So how we do it is important. We have a man who lived in England, left Radio Trinidad, read news on TTT, left here in the 60s, went to England and found a place in the hearts and minds and soul of all of Europe. All of Europe loved Trevor MacDonald. He was hated in Trinidad and Tobago for the manner in which he spoke. These days, there is Abby Phillip on CNN, and she's getting partial reception, even though I hear some people say, but she ain't from here, she's from America. But her parents are from Grandy. Right, so you know who I'm talking about. Right. But there is Martin Simangal, who grew up in Guayco and left and went to Canada and got a job with the CBC. And we do not appreciate this guy called Martin Simangal, which is so unfortunate, again, because of language, how we represent ourselves. We have the benefit of going to schools. I went to Presbyterian, I went to Catholic, I went to government schools, and we were taught with a whip. And that's how I remember the whips on my back. That you must speak properly, you must speak the Queen's language, you must listen to the BBC. I grew up with that orientation. And later on, I will hear from my friends who became teachers. The curriculum does not cater to proper English grammar in the schools. What do we have today? You have graduates in law who could hardly speak the English language properly. They depend on the defense mechanism to win the case and on research. So we are a very complex kind of society here. I have read all the accolades about BIM. I'm very happy that they are members of my fraternity. And yet, BIM is going through difficulty in finding a place in the hearts and minds of people from Trinidad and Tobago.
I just wanted quickly to say, Mandisa mentioned French and Spanish language. So I'm wondering aloud if they have done better than us in terms of making films which speak to their identity in those islands. I'm just throwing that out. Rue Casnev is from Martinique, a beautiful movie. And recently I was reading something that Bruce Paddington has written. And he writes about some remarkable films made in Cuba, particularly in the early period of the revolution. Now that would be heavy state sponsorship, which would have its good and its not so good elements. And he also told me that more recently the Dominican Republic has been making some remarkable movies. And it occurred to me, as Mandisa said, in the Anglophone Caribbean, you cannot get away from the US domain. But in the Francophone and Hispanophone Caribbean, you have other foreign media. You have French, the Russ, and you have the whole of Latin America and Spanish cinema. So it occurs to me that perhaps the aspiring and the actual filmmakers in those islands, because they can look to more than one dominant metropolitan film model, have more flexibility. I mean, it sounds paradoxical, but perhaps they feel they have more freedom in trying to make films from their own.
Historically, what happened is, if you look at Francophone African, Antillean, Francophone Caribbean cinema, you're looking at different colonial expectation. French, and I'm going to generalize, but the French thought that their culture was such a great culture, it was best, that the, the, their colonial subjects could carry it and they were worthy of carrying it. They wanted them to carry it. British didn't think we were capable of doing so, right? So there's no funding from the colonials. That's why you see a lot of francophone, African, and even Antillean filmmakers working for Martin because they call de France, right? So they get the money. So that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the gap in terms of Anglophone Caribbean cinema, right, there is a gap 73 to 70s to the, no, it's not just the money. But that's one of the things. The British never gave us, wouldn't give their colonial or former colonials any money because they're capable of doing anything with it. There was also, you can get into the Laval Decree and all that because the French did stop after the Laval Decree in 1934 that stopped the Africans from making films, period. And the British made films on behalf of um, the Nigerians and everything. There was a funny thing, but it's a good, they're complicated, but after independence, sadly, some of the independent leaders of Africa tried to be very fearful of film. And they didn't encourage it either, censorship and also no funding. Cubans, 959, the Cubans, we never picked this up. Cubans believed that cinema was the major platform and revolutionary communication device. So they invested heavily in 1959, set up EKI. They have the best film school in this probably someone saying the word. So they have their own, their own history. What Richard was saying is true though. Okay, you gotta balance that. Again, who pays the piper for the truth? There was always going to be little tangle from great directors like Gabriel. Okay. But anyway, I get this. But um, on memories of underdevelopment, you see all those big directors, they're always going to get issues with state, who's paying for this stuff. It's not like Stalin when the head of the cinema must film, Stalin really putting out little things, hitting stuff. Next thing he's sweeping the cinema, the studio. And then finally, where they had the famous wall where they used to show scenes where people were firing squad in the revolution. He really put them there and shot them, right? So it's extreme of that. But in our case, I wanted to say, just divert a little bit because what Gideon was saying, something clicked. Oh, sorry, Trinidad in particular was not just Hollywood, it's Bollywood. From day one, from the earliest days, we had Bollywood cinema. He talked, this is an aside, but he didn't talk about the guy who's doing Kathak dancing in India. There are a lot of people, a significant amount of people across all races that these watch Indian movies. Some of them because they were deaf, they were subtitled. So you have all of this kind of strange accidental stuff happen. I never figured out how, given that this thing didn't resonate and was not allowed out and not many people saw it here. There is what happened with the East Indians when they got a movie about their struggle? What happened? No one studied what happened was the reaction of what might have happened with the East Indians because they would have had their first big local film. It's relevant to them. The other thing is you have these Indians keep coming back. Urban Kumar, you had Anthony Maharaj and others seem to be there. What
What happened in terms of where was the connection with Bollywood? It seems very tenuous and non-existent. I always said that. This film I just did was in the largest festival in New York. And it's people in my film Afro Trinidadian family. So I
scratch my head because I know they dig in cinema, period. They have a long tradition in cinema. This festival was established in 1952. But I did think, okay, looking at a narrative, it has what relevance does it have to you? But clearly, they're not looking necessarily for people in the diaspora, Indian diaspora thing. They're just looking at stories, which comes back to who we are. I do disagree with Gideon in terms of that. That's why I said I have to have English subtitles or dub to understand, you know. But I want to say something about identity. What is that Trinidad identity? It's fluid. One minute we would talk, well, first of all, we no longer speak French. Before that, what language did the people who now live here speak? What did the people with Caribs speak? What did the Africans from West Africa speak? What did the Indians, the Bhojpuri? Not Hindi, well, Hindi, yeah, but Bhojpuri, they under, you know. So those are where we came from. This melting pot created all of those things kind of amalgam, but it's in recession. It's actually going from the colonial British to the, which we talk about proper English talk about, but it's going to the neo-colonial American. And this recession or transition of this language, you can see the children, because the generations now don't speak like we used to. My neighbors used to have, and we love the code switch. My little neighbors in the past, when they were playing cowboys and Indians or whatever they did, I can't remember. But they would have the screen voice, hey, got you, man, bang, you know? And then they would, hey, now, move to the left now, man, right? Now I notice it's pure American. Hey, you gotta move to the left. Hey, got you here, man, you know? Right. I also pick up the language that they use. It's much more Americanized now because you obviously you're not that it's absorbed. So it's people like to say it's receding, but it's actually changing. Yes, Jamaicanized as well, right? And of course, we pick up and use, we develop our own slang. We pick up the old slang, dancehall slang, blah blah. You know, man, them bro, you know, beer shite, you know, things like that. Get it all down, right? So we have a kind of you can't really fix this thing. When we talk about a recession, or is it our identity? Is our identity that we're thinking was maybe crystallized independence, post-independence. But there's been a long path, a very fast track since then. And finally, where do we go from here? I think the fever of independence um, broke. And we were there in the 70s and the early 80s with the West Indian cricket team was at the zenith, remember? And beyond, a little bit beyond that. When I was making a film in South Africa, I noticed the young people were very, very much restless because the promises, the economic promises, weren't quite working out, you know? And I could sense, I know man, Malay man, these people coming up too. But there was a disappointment with the ANC that couldn't deliver to them. And it reminds me of what happened in 1970. Because 8 years after independence, the young people were dissatisfied with promises. So all of that is a mix now. So I don't know. I think I have time for it.
Okay, so I'm going to have to put on my lecturer hat and bring some closure to this because I'm also aware that it is 7 o'clock and we promised you that we'd be done at 7. So I have one question left for my panel, and then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience or comments from the audience. We can't see you past, I can't see you past the lights that are on us. So once I'm finished asking the question, I'm going to ask someone to take the mic and walk with it. All right, so here we go. Your closing thoughts, please. Barth speaks of the death of the author. The notion that the meaning of a text is not fixed and determined by the author, but is instead created by the reader or viewer in the active interpretation of the language and the action of the characters. So, taking all of that into consideration, what are we meant to take away from them? We need to celebrate each other. We need to understand that the outside world does not owe us anything.
We are thinkers. We come through all kinds of difficulties. We've emerged as a 21st century society, and as a people, we need that cohesion. We need to move forward in a very positive way and use the element of media to tell us to the rest of the world whether they like it or not.
Okay, what are we supposed to take away from that? I think I very much agree with what he said. I know for a fact that my father wrote the screenplay and he handed it over to the producer and the director. He thought they were going to change it. He literally thought, okay, this is like, a draft. And next thing you know, he turns around, he talks to his best friend, Wilbert Holder, who's in the movie and one of the producers as well. And he said nothing changed. This is it. And he was shocked. I think he's still shocked up until he passed away. And what I think it meant is that because he thought there were changes and he would be safe, he was courageous enough to write the story as raw as it was. And I think maybe some of us now have to take on that courage. Tell, as you said, our stories in whatever way that we can express our truths. And maybe that's really what we take away from it. Because of the fact it resonates. For such a long time, every time I see an audience, I've shown this around the country, right? With permission. And every time the audience sees it, they say, oh my God, I can't, and they get emotional, they can't believe it. It's just like today. And so maybe, just maybe, telling our truths in the best way we can will forever last and have an impact on the audience.
And Lisa said exactly what I was going to say. When I was having, of course, her special identity with the movie, when I watched it, I thought what an amazingly courageous film that was. Astonishingly courageous. And I really don't know why it didn't apparently take in TNT when it was released, but I'm going to hear what you told me because what I was going to say is it is now a historical film, 50 years. And I think it'd be so important that it should be shown now, today, to as wide audiences as possible in TNT and probably elsewhere in the Caribbean too. It was a brave, brave film.
Along those lines, again, I think it should be restored. Of course, the producer who's still alive and whoever has interest in it is supposed to get the money from the justice, from the work that was done. And hopefully will accrue to them. But as I said, time passes and time future. So you really need to look at this particular thing to say that we are standing still. If that's the outcome, okay. But Malcolm X, the tree without roots is dead, and we have already 10 years grasp on our history. They don't teach history in secondary school. It's not mandatory anymore. Am I correct? They teach some, but it's not like you have to. Listen, I was teaching 12 years a slave in my African cinema class. No joke, about 6 years ago, a Trinidadian young man said, wait, that's slavery in Trinidad. Think about that. And nobody believes me. Nobody believes me. That happened, right? Huh? You don't believe me? This happened, and he wasn't joking. Maybe he was kind of fooling around, mess with my head. But I did tell him that the students, that these are plantations we are walking on, and we don't know that. It would scare us. A lot of things. There was an occasion when I was filming a slave burial ground in Aruca, and they had stones there, and there was a Someone give us a permanent deed because the building houses and thing, we own anything. I went by the young man who grew up in the area, who was a custodian in the steel land trailer. We was having a little brandy, you know. And I just said, where's the real burial ground? See, where you're talking about? I said, where do people really bury, girl? I said, come, let me go in here. And they had already built a house on the people. I not going to make a movie about a horror movie about people moving in. Understand? These are real things, so we have no idea. We make films about that. Maybe we make films to reclaim it. Seems like you have a Filipino. You want to go up Filipino and have a family day and a sports day. And consolidate what we have. I think I'm not sure. Let's talk forever. This joke about pluralism, right? Oh, Trinidad is plural. I'm not talking about the big. I'm just saying Trinidad. Trinidad is plural society. So what? What are you doing about it? Just showing up and being of multiple ethnicities or religions or whatever. It's wasted. It was wasted. Um, if you want to stretch it to African and Indian, African times Indian is a huge thing. But not African minus Indian or vice versa, or divided. So we wasted that energy. These are huge civilizations that come down here. We did not have, because of colonialism, neocolonialism, we did not have the impetus or the wisdom to say, let's make the most of it. We continued with the colonial divide and rule. Everybody said, so, you know, I think that's one of the thrusts of going forward. At the same time, these groups have to consolidate within as well, because they're not consolidated within. There's a lot of teeth out there. So if we can kind of demystify that and go forward, God bless. And that's, I sound like a politician now. Go on.
Okay, and we'll open the floor and take questions from the audience. And I can't see. Thank you.
Oh,
I was thinking about the 70s and just that get workshop and I wondered what impact, if any, that would have had on the development of.
Just want to make one historic thing. Hugh Robertson, we want to find that supposedly filmed the play Dream on Monkey Mountain. Where's that?
Yeah, what I said, Dr. Ramsar suggested is very true. He was and first did Dream on Monkey Mountain in Trinidad as filmed in Trinidad before he went on to the BIM. But my father, Raoul Compton, first of all, was influenced to write this. He started back at Cape Town Voicing. He went to the March to Cali. He was a business reporter. He became radicalized by 1970. But what fascinated him was Barish Mirage. First he was for it, then he was against it. When they reached by him, he outside all the guns, right? And the people around him, and that he was like, who is this character? So this research is part of what led to the character of him. And to further answer your question, before he wrote this, that he was trying to act in Walcott, and he gave up and went into writing this instead. So there, I hope that helps.
You were talking about the unavailability of them since it came out. My recollection is that the producer, which was Robertson's wife, had a lot to do with the unavailability of the film being seen by more people then, right? She kept a sort of a stranglehold. From what I was told, she kept a sort of a stranglehold on the film, right? So I gather that if you want to do anything with it, you probably have to check the
Yes, this is why I said you have to give the money to the producer, the surviving people as being real diplomatic. And
But I
yeah.
thought you didn't know that.
No, well, I didn't. I'm not saying I knew that either. Dig it?
No,
You know what I mean? I'm not about to. That's conjecture again. I don't know, perhaps, right? What I would say though,
Yours is not.
okay, well, what I would say though is, um, it's very hard. People always say, where's in your film? Where is it available? For a Caribbean, for most Caribbean cinema, it's not available. Yeah. Huh? It was a sailor paper based bookshop. The actual, obviously they try to monetize it and have a sale, so everything's cool now. What I would say is,
I was up in here.
yeah, um, it was getting a black. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. Um,
Under normal circumstances, a lot of films that have been in this position. See, you got a lot of great films. One of the greatest African American films, or great American film, is Kill of Sheep, made by the greatest African American filmmaker, not Spike Lee, obviously.
it's not, what's his name? Tyler Perry. His name is Charles Burnett or Charlie Burnett. Right? That's another level. His student film at UCLA, Kill of Sheep, was entered in the registry of Great American Film in number 60 something. It's a student film. Problem is, he didn't have the rights to the mechanical rights to the music. So it never got a run. Martin Scorsese, the Italian American director, later restored the film, cleared the rights, and had it at Berlin Film Festival. So a great film like this, you need somebody in who wasn't big in cinema and has some money. Coppola would do that too, but he is unfortunately he has some financial problems with his latest film. Yeah, he becomes self-financed. He's struggling. Yeah, but that's what happens. So something like that you need to restore. You need a patron to do it, right? But generally, a lot of our films have disappeared. Period, and they're not really in circulation. And that's what answers the question about where we stand on film. And film wasn't available to the audiences of the day. Most of the films stuff here are not available generally to the audience. You may get a couple plays in movie town for Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival, and then that's it. Then you go on the circuit with film festivals. I think the last one has been something like 30 something festivals around the place. With 5 awards. Okay, so what? Well, what does it do here? That show that movie town twice. My television series, which I made back in the 90s, much more popular. Understand? So I used to get an audience of 250,000 for my shows on TV. So nobody really checks it. Just that's all they say. Now the great African directors, the festival filmmakers. It's sad. Go to Cuba. Cuba talks about the film, but well, you're not supposed to align with the average Cuban. But if you speak with average Cubans, they don't know any of the great directors of the film. What's that? Right? Same thing anyway. Africa, people Africa, nobody knows who Sam Ben was. Except, well, the average citizen doesn't know who Sam Ben was, who's the father of African cinema, whatever someone's films. Right? They don't have the cinemas. Some of it is censored. So there's this gap we have, right? And content. Now you get some content, but what is the content about? You know, I don't know. Sorry. But we got a lot of, as I said, what stories might those be? Because you see, the 1970s going into the 80s was the coming with video and things. A lot of the TV series were made by people who were supplying the advertising agencies. So we got that kind of bougie, feel good stuff, you know? And we get our people, good class people in stereotype, you know? Even ethnically, who's the gardener, you know? Who's the Maxi driver, who's the bartender, you know what I'm saying? And the same thing when we say someone colorism or she calls it shadism, it's all there. So we still on that, right? So that is really what people observe. And then if you don't even look, if a young person doesn't look at local content, they get another set of stratification and craziness from the big north. And then you get the Bollywood. My God, everybody's Persian. Let's get honest. It's only since Netflix you've seen movies, TV series, and movies from the Indian South. Right? Tamil movies and stuff. Before that, all of them. I was in Bollywood, I was filming something. So they have this supplicant relationship with these gods and goddesses on the screen. It's horrible. India's full of colorism. Pico and all that. You know? So it's just terrible. Look, can you think of the psyche of the people? Right? Can you think of the psyche of the people?
Okay. We'll take one last question from the audience. One last
I just want to
comment.
make a comment, and I appreciate what Vanessa just talked about in terms of the screen play not being changed. I noticed the bullying scene, and we all know the current conversation that is going on. So it means that for 5 decades, an institution has not figured out bullying. But it also means, in terms of if we're looking at what we talk about in terms of art imitating life, how are we shifting things? So I really appreciate the fact that you said it wasn't changed. So it means as if, as a society, have made major decisions around accepting what we don't like and not wanting to change it. But every time these instances happen, we flare up and do the 9-day wonder and nothing changes. So we're hoping, at least I am hoping, that with the current incident that has happened will be the last.
Okay. With that, I'd like to bring tonight's panel to a close. Music and all again for tuning up. And for those of you who joined us in the online products, members of the panel.